Hello, sorry for this. I hope you can all hear me because I don't have internet connection. I'm doing this over a phone. The first question I was asked was that I received by email by Alistair was, Michael, can you speak a few words on Bhagavan's teachings as it relates to ajāta? More specifically, the following from the Sri Ramana book. Then he quotes a portion. That this is a portion from the chapter on world and God in the supplementary part of Sri Ramana, the second part. Sadhuam actually explains it in context, but when he comes to ajāta, he just summarizes the import of ajāta in the following words. No such thing as the world has ever come into existence. What you see is not the world, it is only you, the real self. Other than you, nothing has ever existed. There never was any such thing as creation, sustenance, or destruction. You alone exist. To understand ajāta, or at least to begin to understand ajāta, we need to understand it in the context of Bhagavan's teachings as a whole. Bhagavan often explained that different theories of creation are given to suit people of different degrees of spiritual maturity and different degrees of willingness to accept deeper teachings. Most people assume that the world exists independent of their perception of it. That's what we all naturally believe. We see the world, it seems to exist out there. It seems to us that it existed before we were born and it will exist after we die. It continues to exist when we're asleep. This is what we all assume. But we actually have no evidence for this. We make exactly the same assumption when we're dreaming. When we're dreaming, we see a dream world, and we assume that dream world exists independent of our perception of it. But it existed before we saw it, and it will continue to exist after we cease seeing it. But though we assume that while dreaming, as soon as we wake up, we understand that the world didn't actually, that the dream world didn't exist other than our perception of it. It was created. Its creation and our perception of it were one and the same thing. But most religious and scientific and philosophical explanations of creation assume that the world exists independent of our perception of it. The general name for such theories is Drishti-Srishti Vada. Srishti means creation, Drishti means seeing or perception in general, and Vada means contention. So most theories are based on the assumption that the world exists before we perceive it, and that it exists whether we perceive it or not. Bhagavan taught us, generally, in Uludhanapta and other such works, is what is called Drishti-Srishti Vada. That is perception, creation, contention. That is the contention that there is no creation other than perception. Just as in a dream, the creation of the dream world and the perception of the dream world are one and the same thing. Bhagavan says the world we are now perceiving is just a dream. It doesn't exist independent of our perception of it. So it's brought into seeming existence merely by our seeing it. And if we don't see it, as in sleep, it doesn't exist. This is naturally, for many people, this is, it's not difficult to understand this, but it's difficult to accept this. Most people are unwilling to accept that the world doesn't exist apart from their perception of it. But Bhagavan says, if you're willing to accept this, this will help us a lot to detach ourselves from the world, because what prevents us knowing ourselves as we actually are is that our mind is still very attached to things other than it's awareness of things other than itself. In other words, it's awareness of the world. So our mind is always going out, away from ourselves, towards other things, towards the world. So long as we take the world to be something real, something that exists independent of our perception of it, we will naturally have more, be more interested in it and be more concerned about it. But if we are willing to accept that this world is just a dream, that it exists just because it seems to exist just because we see it, then it will be easier for us to detach our mind from it. So for whatever Bhagavan taught us was very practical. Bhagavan's one aim was to give us all the help required, turn our attention within, and I surrender ourselves completely. So whatever teachings he gave had that one aim in mind, to help us to turn within. So this teaching also, by teaching us that the world doesn't exist independent of our perception of it, this helps us to detach ourselves from the world and makes us more willing to turn within. And if we are willing to accept that this world is just a dream, as Bhagavan says, then naturally when we see the world, we see so many problems in the world, and we naturally feel concerned about the problems. We see suffering and so many things that we feel concerned about. If this is all just a dream, what is the can do to bring an end to all the suffering in the world? Obviously, the best way to bring it up in all the suffering we see in a dream, to bring all that suffering in, is to wake up from the dream. Bhagavan says, likewise, the best way to bring to an end all the suffering we see in this world is simply to wake up. So the greatest good we can do to the world is by turning our attention back within and trying to know ourselves as we actually are, and thereby surrendering ourselves as ego to God, or to our real nature, whatever however we choose to describe it. Because God is nothing other than our true nature in actuality, according to Bhagavan. So Bhagavan taught us this Drishti-Srishti Vada. But actually, he also revealed that this is not actually his experience. His experience is that there is no world at all. No ego has ever risen, and there's been no seeing of any world. This is what he revealed. He said it was his own experience. But obviously it's difficult for us to accept this, because so long as we see the world, how can we deny that we are seeing it? Obviously our experience is telling us whether it's real or unreal, we are seeing the world. There is an appearance of a world out there in front of us, seemingly. So that's why Bhagavan begins Uludunapadu with the words Nam Ulahum Kandalal, which means because we see the world. All Bhagavan's teachings are given to us because we see the world. If we don't see the world, if we are aware just of ourselves and not any phenomena, then there's no problem, there's no need for any teachings. But so long as we see the world, and whenever we see a world, whether this world or world in any other dream, we always experience ourselves as a part of that world. We experience ourselves as a person within the world we are perceiving. So if we want to be free of this, of the perception of the world, we obviously have to be free of the perception of ourselves as if we were a person in the world, as if we were a body, in other words. And for that, in order to free ourselves from that perception, I am this body, we have to know ourselves as we actually are. And for that, we have to turn our attention within. So Bhagavan teaches us that though the world seems to exist, it doesn't actually exist. It's a mere appearance. And it appears, why? Because we see it. It doesn't appear when we don't see it. It's only when we perceive the world that it seems to exist. In sleep, we don't perceive any world. No world seems to exist. Only when we wake up, we make an assumption, because I look at my watch and 8 hours have passed, and now the sun had set last night, and now the sun is rising. Therefore, so many hours have passed, the world must have existed during those 8 hours. We make that assumption, even though we have no evidence that that is true, the case. We make the same assumption in a dream. So if we are willing to accept that this world doesn't exist independent of our perception of it, that is very helpful for us to turn within. So this Bhagavan's main teachings are this Drishti-Srishti Vada, the fact that the world is just a dream, but it doesn't exist independent of our perception of it. But he said this is not the final truth. Why is it not the final truth? Because to whom does the world appear? The world appears to us only when we rise as ego. When we don't rise as ego, as in sleep, no world appears. When we rise as ego, in waking or dream, the world appears to us. So it's only in the view of ourself as ego that the world seems to exist. What Bhagavan's main teaching is asking us to investigate and see what we actually are. Are we actually this ego? And in verse 17 of Upadesha India, he says very clearly, there he refers to ego as mind, because Bhagavan often uses the term mind as a synonym for ego, because as he explained in verse 18 of Upadesha India, though the term mind is often used as a collective term for the totality of all thoughts, the root of all thoughts is only the first thought I, that is ego. That first thought called I is the perceiving element of the mind. Because it's the perceiving, and all the other thoughts are just things perceived by it. So the perceiving element of mind is the essence of the mind. So generally when Bhagavan uses the term mind, not in all cases, but in many cases, he's using it as a synonym for ego. So in this verse 17 of Upadesha India, he uses the term mind as a synonym for ego. And he says, Manatin uruvei maravadu chaba, manamenam ondrilei undipara, magam nerakam idundipara. That means, Manatin uruvei, the form of the mind, Manatin uruvei maravadu chaba. Maravadu means, literally it means not forgetting. So without forgetting, that's without inadvertence, without allowing our attention to be distracted away towards anything else, if we investigate the form of the mind, or he says, when we investigate the form of the mind without forgetting or without negligence, without getting distracted by anything else, and when we investigate the form of the mind very clearly, what means there by the form of the mind is the essence of the mind, which is ego. If we investigate ego keenly, manamenam ondrile, there's no such thing as mind. And ego seems to exist only when we're looking at other things. When we turn our attention back to look at ego, if we look at it keenly enough, there's no such thing to be found. Because ego is nothing but a false awareness that is aware of things other than itself and aware of itself as if it were one among those other things. That is, as ego, we're always aware of a world. We're always aware of other thoughts. But we're always aware of ourselves as one among those other thoughts, as this first thought, I am this body. That is, when we perceive the world, we perceive ourselves as a part of the world. So, so ego seems to exist only when we are aware of things other than ourselves. When we look back to see what we ourselves are, and thereby withdraw our attention from all other things, when we're aware of ourselves alone, that is the state of pure awareness. And in that state of pure awareness, it is clear that there is no such thing as mind at all. And then Bhagavan concludes that verse 17 by saying, this is Makam Idakam Makam Nerakam Idundipara. This is the direct path for all. Because all problems begin only because we rise as ego. In order to get rid of ego, we just have to look at it and see that it doesn't exist. But if we look at ourselves keenly enough, if we attend to ourselves keenly enough, we'll see there's no such thing as ego, is the conclusion of Bhagavan in that verse. if there's no such thing as ego, since the world exists only in the view of ego, when we investigate ourselves keenly enough and find that there is no such thing as ego, it's not even that ego was something that existed in the past and has now ceased to exist. When we look at ego, we see that there is no such thing. There never was any such thing. So in that state where we see the non-existence of ego, we also see the non-existence of everything else, because everything else exists only in the view of ego. So ultimately, the truth, when we investigate ego keenly, when we investigate ourselves keenly enough and find ourselves to be just pure awareness, which is immutable, which never undergoes any change, we will see there never was any such thing as ego. We never rose as ego. We never saw any world. So that is the final state, the ultimate state of jnana is the state of ajāta. Ajāta literally means non-born, but it implies the world has never come into existence. It hasn't even come into existence as an appearance. Whereas Drishti-Srishti Vada, when Bhagavan teaches Drishti-Srishti Vada, he's accepting the appearance of the world. In ajāta, it is found the world never even appeared. It never came into existence even as an appearance. So that is the ultimate truth. Obviously, we can understand how that logically follows on from Bhagavan's other teaching, but we can never fully understand ajāta so long as we're seeing the world, because ajāta is saying there is no world, there is no ego seeing the world, there never was any ego seeing the world. So we need not break our head trying to understand this. Bhagavan has just given us as a prior intimation that the ultimate, that this is the final state, is that nothing has ever come into existence. Our real nature is ever eternally immutable. It never undergoes any change whatsoever. So nothing ever comes into existence. We alone exist. Even now we alone exist, but now we seem to be seeing ourselves as this world. But what we actually are is just pure awareness, which is never aware of anything other than itself. So there is no world. That is the ultimate truth. But we don't have to worry too much about that now. We just have to accept that Bhagavan has given us this assurance. This is the ultimate truth. But for practical purposes, he taught Drishti-Srishti Vada, because in the state of Vada, there is nothing other than ourselves. So there's no ego to be taught or to do any spiritual practice. There's no one to give any spiritual teachings. So teachings are unnecessary in the state of ajāta. So now we have to accept that we seem to be ego, and we seem to be seeing the world. So long as we seem to be seeing this world, the practical option is to accept Drishti-Srishti Vada. This is all just a dream. Though that ultimately, even that dream is denied by in the state of ajāta. That is, the state of ajāta is the discovery that there never was any dreamer, never was any dream, because there never was any dreamer. The dreamer, it means ego. So it's in that context that Bhagavan taught ajāta. So it's not something that we have to be too much concerned about. It's just a background to the other teachings of Bhagavan. Ultimately, what Bhagavan teaches us in Ululunavtu, which is Drishti-Srishti Vada, ultimately even that will be found to be false. But in order to find it to be false, we have to follow what he taught us in Ululunavtu, which is to turn within and investigate ourselves. Because Ululunavtu is based on, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. That's what Bhagavan says in verse 26. He doesn't say when ego comes into existence. He says if ego comes into existence. So he's not actually accepting the existence of ego, but if it comes into existence, then everything else comes into existence. If it doesn't exist, then nothing else exists. Ego itself is everything. Everything means all phenomena, nothing but ego, in the sense that the ego is seeing itself as all these phenomena. So that is when we read about ajāta, we have to understand it in the context of the whole of Bhagavan's teachings, and we have to understand it as a background, but it helps us to understand the rest of Bhagavan teachings in a better perspective, in a clearer perspective. But it's not something we have to, that is, it's not something that we can apply in practice. What we need to apply in practice is only investigating and surrendering this ego. That's all the practice we need to do. In order to experience ajāta, this is what we need to do. We need to investigate this ego in order to see that it doesn't exist. So that's the answer to the first question. Chris, do you want to read the next question?
Sure, yes. This question is from Bernard Kelly Patterson. I don't know if he's online. Marlon Brando. Let me just see if he's online. Oh, let me just read it. It's probably easier than finding him. Okay, so he says, I believe I can understand on an intellectual level what Ramana Maharshi is getting at with regard to self-inquiry and the resultant understanding that this might bring, i.e. understanding that the self is greater than my body or my individual ego. But I can't say that this understanding has ever come to me as a total experience, a revelation, etc. So I feel that I cannot really claim any actual deep experience of his truth, even though I have no doubts about this truth. My question is, if I should one day get it, what happens next? Because presumably, get it is inverted commas, because presumably this fellowship is for people who haven't quite grasped the truth yet, yourself excluded, naturally. But if any of us should get it, we'd presumably get onto a completely different path and do something radically different with our lives. Question mark. Many thanks for trying to answer what is probably a very stupid question. Okay. That's
no,
it.
This is not a stupid question. This is a question about understanding. There are different levels of understanding. When we first come across Bhagavan's teachings, we read them and we understand at a conceptual level, we can say. We understand the basic principles, we understand the ideas. That's the beginning of our understanding. But that's a relatively superficial understanding. So we need to deepen our understanding. Our understanding is deepened primarily by putting what he said into practice. The more we put what he said into practice, that is, the more we turn our attention within and investigate ourselves, the more clarity we get. Understanding ultimately is a matter of clarity. For example, just to take a simple worldly example, we all understand that 2 plus 2 equals 4. How do we understand that? It's just clear to us. It seems to us so obvious, but no one can doubt it. But it's because we have a certain degree of clarity, but we are able to recognize that 2 plus 2 equals 4. We can just see the connection between 2 plus 2 and 4. We can clearly see the connection. So all understanding ultimately is the ability to see the truth of what is said. So though people often talk about intellectual understanding as if it's something inferior, the intellect is that part of the mind which is clearly able to discern the truth of certain propositions or whatever. Well, ultimately, we need to see the truth of our own nature. So what begins at a conceptual level of the mind, when we read Bhagavan's teaching, yes, it makes sense. So conceptually we understand it. But as we go deeper in the practice, as we put it more and more into practice, we can see more and more clearly, and our conviction increases because we see it more clearly, the truth of what he said. Why did this clarity, by reading and thinking about his teachings, which is necessary, But we can, by reading and thinking, that's by what's called Sravana and Manana, we can get only a certain degree of clarity, a rather superficial degree of clarity. The deep clarity comes only from Nididhyasana. Nididhyasana means the actual practice of contemplation, that means self-contemplation, attending to ourselves. Because where does all clarity come from? Ultimately, what is it? What is the light that is illumining our mind and enabling it to see this world, to be aware both of ourselves and of this world? That is the light. Obviously, the mind is not the original light. The mind is only what's called a reflected or a seeming light. It's called chitabhasa, which means chitabhasa literally means a semblance of awareness. It can also mean a reflection of awareness, because when you look at yourself at your face in a mirror, the reflection is a semblance of yourself. So in that sense, chitabhasa can mean a reflection of awareness, but the basic meaning is a semblance of awareness. It's not the real awareness, because real awareness is pure self-awareness, awareness that is not aware of anything other than itself. Whereas the mind is always aware of things that seem to be other than itself. So mind is not the original awareness, it's not the real awareness, but it is a seeming awareness. Where the mind gets its light from, what is the source from which the mind gets its light? It's from the fundamental awareness, I am. That's our own fundamental awareness of our own existence. That is the original light. So the more we turn our attention back towards I, the more we are facing the light. So the more we face the light, putting it, to express it metaphorically, the more clarity we get. So the more we turn our attention within, the more our mind is illumined, the more our mind gets that deep inner clarity that enables us to recognize the truth of Bhagavan's teachings more deeply. So it's not just a matter of, one day we'll get it. It's as we progress as we follow Bhagavan's path, slowly, all these things will become clearer and clearer to us. But in order for it to come clear, we have to follow the path. We have to put it into practice. But so long as we are still practicing, it's a matter of a gradual unfolding of understanding, or gradual deepening of our clarity of understanding. This is a gradual process until the very last moment. At the very last moment, when finally we manage to turn our attention back for full 180 degrees, again to put it metaphorically. Now, when we're facing out towards the world, we need to turn our attention, metaphorically speaking, 180 degrees back to face ourselves. When we're facing the world, we're ignoring ourselves. When we turn our attention back towards ourselves, to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, to that extent do we ignore the world, or do we cease to be aware of the world. So when we turn the full 180 degrees and face ourselves alone, so we're aware of ourselves alone, we cease to be aware of the world. When we're aware of ourselves alone, we're aware of ourselves as pure awareness. When we're aware of ourselves as pure awareness, ego is thereby destroyed. So that is the real moment of getting it. At that moment when we really get it, we who get it cease to exist. It's like turning to see the light of the sun. If we're in Tiruvannamalai on a hot summer's day, during the Agni Nakshatram in the middle of May, when the sun is at its hottest, if we look up in the midday, if we look up in the sky and see the sun, what will happen? We can see the sun, but as soon as we see the sun, we're blinded. We can never see anything else. Likewise, when we turn and when for one moment we see what we actually are, we will be blinded. That is, we will cease to be ego. We'll cease to be aware of anything other than ourselves. We'll be aware of ourselves alone. That is truly getting it. But who has got it? No one has got it, because what has got it in that state is only what we actually are, which has always got it, has never lost it. So the ultimate, that's like Bhagavan said, ultimately there is nothing to be gained. All we need to do is to get rid of the obstruction, and what was always there will remain as it always was. So jnana is not a new knowledge to be obtained. Jnana is what is the ever-existing awareness I am is jnana. There is no jnana other than that ever-existing awareness I am. The problem is we are always aware that I am, but now we're also aware of other things. Why are we aware of other things? Because we've risen as ego. If we turn back and see what we actually are, we will see that we are just pure awareness, and therefore there never was any ego. Therefore there never was anything else. Then we find that we were always aware of nothing other than ourselves. So that's the state of really getting it. But as I say, once we get it, we will see that we've always had it. We've never lost it. We've always got it. So until then, there's no great revelation. It's a matter of a slow, gradual unfolding of clarity, which comes almost imperceptibly. As we follow this path more and more, our conviction grows deeper and stronger. And because of our clarity of self-awareness becomes clearer. That often, this is another important point, often when people start to follow this path of self-investigation, they find it very difficult. What is this I? How to attend to this I? They find it difficult. The only way to learn to attend to I is to attend to I. The more we attend to I, the clearer and simpler it becomes. Simpler in the sense of it's obvious what self-attention is. That doesn't mean it's necessarily easier, because the more clearly we're able to see what self-attention is, the more all our desires and attachments rise up and drag us outwards. We are not yet willing to let go. So we have to continue following this path of patiently persevering. If we patiently persevere, this clarity will naturally unfold. Bhagavan's teachings will become clearer and clearer, simpler and simpler, more and more obvious to us. When you're in this question, you said, but when we get it, our life won't be the same again, or our life will be completely different. I think for all of us, once we come to Bhagavan, once we accept Bhagavan's teachings, there's no going back. Our life is changed just by understanding Bhagavan's teachings. Our whole outlook on life is changed. The change may not be very dramatic at first, but as we go on with the practice, that change of attitude towards the world becomes more and more deeply ingrained in us. So it's not something that it's not a sudden transformation until the final moment when ego is destroyed. There's no sudden transformation, but there is a gradual unfolding of clarity. And along with that clarity, there comes a willingness to let go, a willingness to be detached. So we're less affected by the things of the world. Life goes on as always. Everyone's life has problems. We all face problems in one form or another. We all have our little joys and our miseries, and the pleasures and pains and the difficulties come. Life goes on according to destiny. All these things come, but we're less affected by these things. The more we become deeply immersed in Bhagavan's teachings, immersed in the practice of Bhagavan's teachings, we're less affected by whatever may happen in the external world. I hope that answers that question adequately.
Can people hear Michael's voice clearly, Shalini?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, that's good. That's great.
We can hear. Thank you.
Okay. So, Michael, you ready for the next question?
Yes.
Okay. There are a couple of somebody's got his video on. Let me just see. Bernard Kelly, right? There's a couple of hands raised, which we'll come to later, but let's do the ones that came by email first. So this is the last one by email. Sir, I am entering marital life in 2 days, so kindly ask Michael G. regarding Bhagavan's teachings and marital life. Sometimes unreasonable fear and anxiety arises and I don't know what to do. Kindly put this question to Sri Michael with namaskarams.
What Bhagavan taught us about married life is the same that he taught us about everything, all other external things. Everything happens according to prarabdha, according to our destiny. If it is your destiny to be married, you cannot escape marriage even if you want to. As they said, if you're destined not to be married, you can't get married even if you want to. All these things are already predetermined. And our prarabdha is allotted to us in the way, each one of us has a prarabdha which is tailor-made to suit our present state of maturity. So for many of us, it's our destiny to get married. That is what is best for us. Whatever happens in our prarabdha is what is best for us at that moment. Married life is, it's right to be fearful of married life. I mean, married life can bring all sorts of problems, but we have to face whatever our destiny brings us, we have to face, and we have to face it with detachment. Married life can bring great joys and it can bring great sorrows. It's the nature of that's such is the nature of life. So if it's our destiny, it's going to happen. We have to accept it with equanimity, and we have to whatever may happen in married life, there will be difficulties. No married life is without difficulties. But we will, if we're following Bhagavan's path, we'll face those difficulties with at least a certain degree of equanimity. We will learn. We will try not to be affected by the pains that come, or by the pleasures that come. We'll try to remain in that state of equilibrium, unaffected by either the joys or the sorrows of married life. Who knows what you say in a few days you're getting married, but who knows what's going to happen? None of us know. A few months ago, none of us dreamt about this coronavirus pandemic. Now it's come and hit the world, and the whole world is transformed by it, and nobody knows when it's all going to come to an end. So the future is always uncertain. Likewise, the married life, whether you're to be married for, some people are married just for 5 years, some people are married for 50, 60 years. So we don't know what the future is going to hold. We don't know whether the relationship is going to work. Sometimes we may enter married life with all optimism and enthusiasm, thinking it's going to work out perfectly, and it doesn't work out perfectly in many cases. In some cases, it does work out perfectly. We just can't say. But whatever it is, whatever may happen, it's all happening according to prarabdha. Prarabdha is what is allotted to us by God or Guru, let's say Bhagavan, allotted to us by Bhagavan for our good. So we have to accept whatever comes as His will for our good. And we have to face up to the joys and sorrows of it and learn from it. We learn from all experiences in life in one way or another. We learn about ourselves. We learn about our desire. Often the difficulties of life are like mirror to us. They show us the strength of our desires and attachments. So we can use whatever comes according to prarabdha, whether it's married life or sannyasa life or whatever it may be, whatever type of life we have, we can use it to, if we face life with divika, with proper judgment, and with vairagya, with detachment, we can learn from any situation in life. So if it's your destiny to be married, it will happen. Though I said jokingly, it's right to fear it, we shouldn't actually fear anything in life. Married life can bring all sorts of troubles. As I say, it can also bring joy. So we don't know what's in store for us, but we shouldn't fear anything, because nothing can happen except by the will of Bhagavan. And whatever happens by the will of Bhagavan is for our good. So let us not fear anything, let us not desire anything, and let us not fear anything. Let us not have high expectations of marriage, and let us just take it in our stride. Whatever comes, whatever is to happen, nothing can happen that is not destined to happen. So let's not worry about anything. Our job is just to surrender to Bhagavan, surrender all our desires and our fears, our likes and our dislikes. Surrender everything to him. The more we surrender to him, the less we will be affected by whatever life may bring. I hope that answers that question adequately.
Okay, so now we can move to the hands up. And Smita seems to be next. I'll just unmute Smita. Doesn't want to unmute. Oh, yeah. Right, yeah, that's unmuted. Okay, Smita.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Yes.
Yeah.
Michael, can you hear?
I can hear, yes.
Okay, good.
Okay. What are the different stages of self-investigation? And if there is no ego, then how do we self-investigate?
Well, the answer to the first question, there are no stages as such, in the sense that what we start doing is what we end by doing, which is trying to turn our attention back within, back towards ourselves, trying to face our attention towards ourselves, to see ourselves alone. That is self-investigation from the beginning to the end. There's no different stages in that sense. But as we progress on this path, as I explained earlier, there is a gradual unfolding of clarity, and along with the clarity comes a deepening of our love, and a deepening of our love means bhakti, and a deepening of our detachment, vairagya. So all these things do unfold as we progress along the path, but there are no stages as such. That's the first thing. The second thing, why we are investigating ourselves is because there seems to be an ego. We seem to be ego. So long as we seem to be seeing the world, who is it who's seeing the world? That I who is seeing the world, that is ego. So though the ultimate truth is that there's no ego, we haven't yet discovered that. In order to discover that, we need to investigate ourselves. So it is the ego that is investigating itself. And when the ego sees what it actually is, it ceases to be ego and remains as good. And this is what it always actually was. So in that sense, when ego sees itself as pure awareness, it sees there never was any ego. This may sound paradoxical, but that is the truth of it. There is only one I. Now we see, there's one I'll refer to as we, because they will often use the term we as a collective form of, as an inclusive form of first person singular pronoun I, and we. Now we are aware of ourselves as I am this body, and we're aware of this world. So this is the state of ego. But who is this I who is aware of itself as I am this body? If we turn our attention back within to investigate this I, we will find eventually that this I is nothing but pure awareness, which is never aware of anything other than itself. So there never was any such thing as ego. But so long as self-investigation is necessary, so long as we seem to be ego, so long as we seem to be seeing the world, as Bhagavan said, the first words of the Matthew, because we see the world. If we didn't see the world, there wouldn't be any need for any self-investigation. There wouldn't be anyone to investigate itself. There would only be pure awareness. Pure awareness never needs to investigate itself because it's never aware of anything other than itself. Because ego seems to exist, we need to investigate it. Does that adequately answer your questions?
Well, I think that there is some sort of a stage involved for sure, because I think, as you said, we have to progress beyond the body. But then you also mentioned that Bhagavan did admit that there is nothing like ego at the end, and that it's only for the sake of teaching that he has made these distinctions of drishti and the perception and all that, the body. But there is nothing even like an ego. So I believe there is some stage that he's referring to inherently, to move beyond the body and to go towards the non-body.
Sorry, Chris, can you tell me what that was? I didn't hear it that clearly.
All right, let me, hang on, let me, now the sound is coming from where? Let me bring it up near, can you just repeat that then?
Okay, yes, I was just telling.
Hang on, Smita's going to
Can
repeat
you
it.
hold on a minute? I'm just putting on a raincoat because it's beginning to rain here, and I'm
Oh.
going to try and move under some trees to get a bit of shelter.
That's Scotland for you.
Yes, this is Scotland.
Can I just intervene for a second? I'm a bit concerned that it's raining because Michael is not in the greatest of health in terms of his respiratory condition. So, Michael, are you sure you want to continue if you're going to get wet and things? Are you going to be all right?
Michael?
Yes, I think so. I moved under some trees.
Oh my God.
And I've got a raincoat on, so I'm sure I'll be okay.
All right. Okay, but Michael, please feel free to, if you start getting wet or there's any inconvenience, you made a tremendous effort, and we've been very, very lucky to have this session with you. So if you feel the least uncomfortable.
Let us continue.
All right, okay.
Michael does not give up easily.
Yes.
Evil is health.
Yeah. So did Smita want to finish off your second point, Smita?
Yes, so can you hear me now, Michael?
Can you get it, Michael?
Can hear a bit better now.
Okay, so I just said that in the beginning you mentioned that there is, according to Bhagavan, there is actually not even ego, and that it's for teaching purposes that he has talked about perception and sight and all the sensory aspects. So I believe there is some version, there is some some room for stages of self-investigation, from moving from the body to the the spiritual and that sort of the eternal phase. So that's that is what I was just trying to say, that yeah, I think that there might be some version of that, and because if there is no ego left, then then how is it possible to perceive all the self, the self and the ego?
When there is no ego left, all problems are solved.
Yeah.
And we reach the end of our journey. When there's no ego left, then there's no world, there's nothing. There's no problems at all. But so long as we, as Bhagavan says, so long as we see the world, we have problems. And so long as we are aware of ourselves as I in this body, that which is aware of itself as I in this body, and which consequently sees the world, that is ego. So long as that ego exists, we need to investigate it. When we investigate it clearly enough, we find it never existed. There never was any ego, there never was any body, there never was any world. Until we reach that final destination, we have to continue following the path that Bhagavan taught us, the path of self-investigation and self-surrender.
Okay, thank you so much, Michael.
In this path, as I said, there are the stages. There are no stages implies like steps, but there are no stages or steps. What we are doing, this is the straight path. We are following along the straight path. What we begin by doing, trying to turn our attention within, is what we continue doing till the very end. Nothing else is required. All that is required is turning our attention within. Within means to face ourselves. That's why Bhagavan expressed it very succinctly in verse 44 of Aksharamlai. Chiramdi aham, turning within. Dinam hakan Khan, turning within, see yourself daily or constantly, continuously with the inner eye. That means the eye of the inward facing attention. Terium, it will be known. So this is all that is, it will be known means our real nature will be known. So this is all that we need to do, is just to repeat, constantly try to turn our attention back within to face ourselves, to see what we actually are. When we talk of staging, it sounds like it implies that there's a different method to be adopted at each stage, but there's no different method. There's only one method. The only way to see the sun is to turn and look at it. The only way to see what we actually are is to turn within and look at ourselves.
Okay. Thank you.
We may be going deeper in this part, but it's a deepening, but not at different stages as such. It's a seamless process of going deeper.
Okay.
Does that make it clear?
Yes, it's a lot clear now. Thank you so much.
So, and then if you could kindly mute yourself,
Yeah.
Lita. And the next person on our list is Kiran, and I'll unmute him now. He's unmuted, so that's fine.
Hi, Michael. Can you hear me?
Can you
Hello?
hear Michael?
Not very clearly.
Let me move the laptop a little bit nearer the mic. Just hang on a second. Try again.
Can you hear me, Michael, now?
Yes, I hear you. Yes.
Yeah. So my question. So I was very much interested in astronomy before coming to this path, and they say there are more stars in the universe than there are grains of sand in this entire planet Earth. But now then Bhagavan comes in and he says all of this that you perceive is basically not real, and it does not exist. It comes into existence only when you wake up as ego. So my question is basically, when you try putting this self-inquiry into practice, you feel that you cannot go within unless you have love for it. So you need to have that love to turn within, because unless you love something, you cannot actually go all the way. And I see, after I start doing this practice, sometimes it gets really tough. Now without love I cannot persevere. So my question is basically,
Can you hear Michael?
how do I develop this?
Sorry, it's not very clear. Somehow there's also a reverberation. I think maybe you can repeat what is being said.
Okay, how far
Sure,
back?
sure, Michael.
Wait, he's going to try and talk a bit louder.
Okay.
So can you hear me now? All right? Is it clear now?
I can hear you now. Yes, but if you speak a bit slowly, and if I have difficulty, I'll tell you.
And speak a little louder if you can also.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that. So the question is basically, unless you have this love to turn within, you cannot persevere on this self-inquiry path. So I'll repeat: unless you have that love to turn within, you cannot actually persevere on this path.
So what he's saying is, unless you have love for the path, you cannot carry on the path. I think that's what you're saying, isn't it, Kiran?
That's right. Unless you have love. So how do I develop this love for
How to
Arunachala?
develop the love?
That's the question.
That's his question.
Very, very, very good question. Yes, it is true. We cannot follow this path without love. But none of us are totally lacking in love. If we were totally lacking, the very fact that we come to Bhagavan and that we want to follow his path he has shown us shows at least to that extent we have love. And the only way to cultivate love, or the only way to increase our love, is by putting what he taught us into practice. So we need love to put it into practice, but we need to practice in order to cultivate the love. Now we have a little love. Let's start with what we've got. Let's use the little love we've got to put it into practice, at least a little. And it's a snowballing process. As the little ball of snow begins to roll down, it picks up more and more snow, it gets more and more heavy, and it rolls faster and faster and faster. Likewise on this path, we start off with a little love. Let's use the little love we have. This little love has been given to us by Bhagavan. It's a seed that Bhagavan has put in our heart. Let us nurture this seed by giving it the water of attentiveness, by trying to turn our attention within. The more we try to turn our attention within, the more we try to surrender ourselves, the more we try to let go of other things, cease to be concerned or attached to other things, the more we manage to let go and turn within, the more that little seed of love will grow. So the only way is practice. The answer to all questions is practice, practice, practice. Practice brings clarity, it brings love, it brings vairagya. It all comes, but only with practice. When our love is little, we may not be putting it into practice as much as we should be, as we would like to be doing. But at least every little, Bhagavan used to say, every step we take on this path is one step in the right direction. I mean, one step closer to our goal. So let us, even if we're starting off with baby steps, even the greatest Olympic runners, they start off when they're toddlers with making baby steps, and only later do they become Olympic runners. So we are like that. We start off with our baby steps. Let's try little by little, gently, but persistently to turn within. If we do so, the love will certainly grow and develop. Does that adequately answer your question?
Yes, Michael, that does. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Someone says, what is the video? Let me just go to the bottom. Karen, no. Anand, wait. No. This may be Anand, this is Anand Swami. He says, where can one learn systematic practice within this tradition? Maybe that's the question that he has in mind.
Yes, that's the question.
Okay. Let me unmute him anyway. Anand, was that your question?
Yes, that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Michael.
Where can we learn it? The only place we can learn it is within our own heart, by trying to put it into practice, by trying to turn within. That is the way to learn it. Bhagavan used to say, you're trying to find the way into your own home. No one can show you the way into your own home. You yourself have to find the way into your own home. Bhagavan said, if this were an objective path, the way could be shown objectively by another. But this is not an objective path. This is a path of turning within. So Bhagavan's teaching, in Bhagavan's words, have given us plenty of clues. We have to try to put those clues into practice. We have to try to turn our attention. Now our attention is facing towards things other than ourselves. Who is it who is aware of these things other than ourselves? We have to turn our attention back towards ourselves, towards the one who's aware of all these things. We're not going to find nowadays there are people who offer courses in training in meditation, but this is a different path. This is a path we have to learn. This path by ourselves. We have to learn it. How to learn to ride the bicycle? You can't go to a school and learn to ride the bicycle. The only way to learn to ride the bicycle is to get on a bicycle, fall off many times, and slowly learn how to balance on the bicycle. Likewise on this path. We have to begin trying to investigate ourselves, trying to turn our attention within. At first, we'll be unsteady. We'll keep on failing in our attempts, but every failure is a step closer to success. So it's only by trying to put it into practice that we can do it. And nobody else can teach us this. We have to learn ourselves. But when I say no one can teach us this, I'm not. Bhagavan has given us plenty of clues. Bhagavan has clearly indicated what we need to do. We need to turn our attention within, back towards ourselves. And decide who is it who's aware of all these other things. All these thoughts appear. It's not by asking these questions, obviously. These questions are to turn our attention back towards ourselves. The turning of our attention back towards ourselves, that is self-investigation. That we can learn only by continuing to try, only by trying. The more we try, the clearer the way will become. Does that adequately answer your question?
Yes. Yeah. I was looking for the textbook, but you're telling me there isn't one, and I understand. Thank you.
Right, just looking at the. Right. Okay, so the next question is from Fran, and it is how to be in world of business and still not be attached, or do I need to retire from Wall Street? That's it.
Okay. No, attachment doesn't lie in Wall Street. Attachment lies in your heart. Bhagavan never recommended. Some people, external renunciation is necessary. But generally speaking, Bhagavan didn't recommend external renunciation because it's very easy to quit our job, to go and sit in a cave in the Himalayas or whatever. It's easy to outwardly renounce the world, but that is not the real renunciation. The real renunciation is the renunciation in our heart, the giving up of our desires and attachments. We can give up our desires and attachments equally well in Wall Street or or sitting in a cave in the Himalayas. It may seem to be more difficult if you're in Wall Street, because in Wall Street there's more distraction, more temptation to go outwards, to make more and more and more money. But what we need to give up is that desire for more and more and more. If you can give up desire in the midst of all the temptations of Wall Street, that is a very, very great achievement. So sometimes what are seemingly unfavorable circumstances are actually, we can turn to our advantage and make them favorable. So it's really giving up your job in Wall Street isn't necessarily going to solve the problem. So long as there's desire in your heart, giving up Wall Street isn't going to solve it. What you need to do is to give up the desire, give up the attachment. That can be done only by trying to turn our attention within and by, as I say, following Bhagavan's path of self-investigation and self-surrender. Self-investigation means turning our attention within. The more we turn our attention within, the more ego subsides. And when ego subsides, its desires and attachments subside along with it. So, and the part of self-investigation, the part of self-surrender, ultimately they're one and the same part. But the self-surrender part of it is giving up our desires and attachment. On Wall Street, you make profit and you make loss. When you make profit, you feel happy. When you make loss, you feel down. Oh, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have invested in that or whatever. Remaining in a state of equanimity, both at the time of profit and at the time of loss, is in an exercise in self-surrender. You're not allowing yourself to be moved by the ups and downs of life. So there is no reason why you shouldn't follow this path in Wall Street. But you may find after some time, if you're following this path, that your desire to continue working in Wall Street may drop off, and you may find it more conducive to seek to earn your livelihood in some other way. That may happen, but you cannot. These things are not in your hands. If it's your destiny to work all your life in Wall Street, you will work all your life in Wall Street. External renunciation, we can try to renounce. You can decide tomorrow, okay, I'm going to give up my job in Wall Street. But if it's not your destiny to do so, some obstacle will come and you'll be prevented from doing so. So it's not up to us. Bhagavan said, it's not up to you to decide whether you work or whether you renounce. Your very effort to work or to renounce is a bondage. That is, it's a desire to give up this work, or the desire to have to work. That is what needs to be given up. Bhagavan said in one place in Who Am I? Likes and dislikes are both to be disliked. So the only desire we should have is the desire to be free of all desires. And in order to be free of all desires, who is it who has desires? Desires are all only for ego. So it's in order to we can reduce the strength of our desires and attachments to a certain extent. But so long as we remain as ego, we will have desires and attachments inevitably, because the very nature of ego is to have desires and attachments. So if we want to be completely free of desires and attachments, we need to give up ego. And to give up ego, we need to investigate what we actually are. So whatever be your working in Wall Street is according to prarabdha. So long as you're destined to work there, you'll work there. When you're destined to stop working there, you'll stop working there. That is not in your hands. You need not be concerned about these things. What you need to be concerned about is turning your attention within and weakening the hold of your desires and attachments. That is true renunciation. Does that adequately answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. Can you maybe turn your camera off? We've got another question now from Raj. What key scripture should we read on a daily basis?
Above all other scriptures are the words of our own Guru. So if we are following Bhagavan's path, Bhagavan's own teachings are for us the greatest scriptures. They may not be the best scriptures for everyone, but for us they're the best scriptures. So I would say Nanya, Uludunapdu, Upadeshundiya, these Arunachyastuti Panchakam, all of Bhagavan's original writings. This is his own words that he himself has written. There's no scripture for us. There's no scripture to compare with these. Does that adequately answer your question?
Raj?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. So next question we have from Jnanama. Murugana was treated badly in the ashram, and MJ said this was helpful for subsidence of the ego.
Yes, Murugana may have had no ego, but Bhagavan is, through Murugana's life, Bhagavan taught us that it's always better to be in a position where we are not held in high regard by others, where we are. It's better to be treated badly than to be praised and put on a pedestal. So for all true devotees of Bhagavan, he will give difficulties in their life. If Murugana, we cannot know exactly when Murugana's ego was destroyed, but from his poetry and can assume that it was very early on after he came to Bhagavan that his ego was destroyed. But outwardly, his life continued to be a difficult life. So maybe Bhagavan through his life was teaching us that we shouldn't be looking for a comfortable life or an easy life. We should be ready to face, let the whole world taunt us, let the whole world ridicule us. That is only for our good, because and Bhagavan said that those who scold our ego, those who scold us, those who abuse us, they are our real friends. Because who are they abusing? They're abusing ego, who is our true enemy. So those who are against our enemy are our true friends. Those who praise us, they are the ones we have to be very wary of. Because the worst trap for ego is to acquire a taste for praise and appreciation. It's much better to be ill-treated in the world than to be praised. And if we are praised by people, if people do put us on the pedestal and do hold us in high regard, that itself is a very big challenge. Because it's very, very easy. We may think we're humble, we may think we're not moved by praise, but the ego is a very tricky bedfellow. The ego will always be secretly taking pleasure in the praise it receives. So we have to be ever vigilant. The only way to prevent ego from rising and prevent ego from being moved by either praise or blame is to be constantly keeping a watch on it. In an earlier talk recently, just while talking, an analogy came to me. Supposing there's a rabbit in a rabbit hole. Whenever the rabbit peeps out, it looks to see if anyone is looking. If no one is looking at it, it comes out and plays. But if someone's watching it, it goes back into its hole. Ego is like that. If we're constantly watching ego, that is, if we're constantly being self-attentive, it won't rise and play its mischief. But if we allow our attention to go outwards, ego will jump out and start all its mischief. So the only way to keep ego in check is by constantly turning our attention within. Sometimes, whatever our prarabdha is, if it's our prarabdha to be ill-treated, that is good for us. If it's our prarabdha to receive praise, that is good for us, but it's very challenging for us. Praise is very dangerous. We're much safer being abused and ill-treated by the world than by being praised by the world. If we are praised by the world, we have to be doubly vigilant about the rising of ego. We have to try all the more to turn our attention within and keep a constant eye on this ego to make sure it doesn't pop out and start its mischief. Does that adequately answer the question?
Dhyanama, yes? No response.
Okay.
I would just make one point, of course, though maybe Murugana was badly treated earlier on. Later on, he was well looked after. He had a very nice room.
Yes,
someone looking after him all the
was.
time. And he was well looked after.
Yeah.
Had medical treatment, etc., whatever needed.
When he needed looking after, Bhagavan provided the care through the ashram. But earlier on in his life, but Murugana was not affected by any of these things. So Murugana said he didn't care about anything. He said, I've seen the sun and I've been blinded. I don't see anything else. So Murugana was indifferent to all how he was treated. It was nothing to him. He wasn't there for people appreciating him or people treating him well. He was there only for the love of Bhagavan. For him, all he cared about was Bhagavan and Bhagavan's love, and he cared nothing else.
Thank you, Michael. That's great.
So there's another question from Kiran here. World, universe, cosmos are not different from the mind. Mind is not different from the heart. Heart is the seat of the self. So in the heart, whole story comes to an end. Can you explain this, Michael?
Yes. Where does the world appear? Where does the cosmos appear? It appears in our own mind. Only in the view. In other words, it's only in the view of ego the world seems to exist. Only in the view of the mind the world seems to exist. So the world doesn't exist independent of the mind. And mind, what is the essence of mind? Is awareness. The mind or ego is nothing but a false awareness. I am this body. In that false awareness, there is a real element. That real element is the fundamental awareness I am. So ego cannot exist without I am. I am is the heart, what Bhagavan describes as the heart. So the ego doesn't exist, or mind doesn't exist apart from the heart. And the heart is the ultimate reality. So I am is alone what is real. Nothing exists except without I am. Have you ever been aware of anything without being aware of I am aware of it? In order to be aware of I am aware of it, in order to be aware that I am aware of it, you must be aware that I am. So everything ultimately comes down to I am. But when you say I am, our fundamental awareness of our own existence, I am, such it, is the screen on which the picture of all this, of both the seer, namely ego, and the seen, namely the world, both appear on the screen. That screen is pure awareness, I am. So that alone is what is real. That is what we need to cling to. Does that adequately answer that question?
Thank you, Michael. It definitely does, is the message that came up.
Right.
So then now Abhishek is asking a question. How is Sadhu Om's life compared with Murugana?
Each had difficulties in their own way, but each of them had a different role. Murugana came to Bhagavan obviously very much earlier than Sadhu Om. Murugana came to Bhagavan at about Sadhu Om was born in 1922. I think Murugana came to Bhagavan in 1923. So obviously, in a sense, they were a different generation. Sadhu Om only came to Bhagavan in 1946. So Sadhu Om was Murugana was in physical terms, he was very close to Bhagavan. People used to call him the shadow of Bhagavan, because he was constantly at Bhagavan's, sitting at Bhagavan's feet for so many years. Sadhu Om, relatively speaking, he had less contact with Bhagavan, and by the time Sadhu Om came to Bhagavan, it was many more people were there, visitors were there. So Sadhu Om had relatively little close personal contact with Bhagavan, which Murugana had. But each had a different role. Murugana's role was to get works like, it's because of Murugana, but we have Urdu Napadu, Upadeshu India, Atma-vichara. All these works were composed by Bhagavan the request of Murugana, because Murugana asked appropriate questions and created appropriate context for Bhagavan to give teaching. So for getting Bhagavan's teachings in their pure and undiluted form, Murugana had a peerless role. The only other person whose role was comparable was Shiv Kashankalai, for whom Bhagavan gave Nanya. Murugana also, he wrote thousands and thousands and thousands of verses on Bhagavan. He recorded Bhagavan's teachings in Guru Vachika Kavai, and he wrote thousands of verses in praise of Bhagavan. Sadhu Om also wrote thousands of verses, but their verses are somewhat different. Murugana's verses I mean, not entirely different. There's a lot of overlap, but Murugan's verses, a lot of his verses, he's indirectly, clearly expressing Bhagavan's grace. What he attained by Bhagavan's grace is very clearly indicated in a lot of Murugan's verses. In Sadhu Om's, it's very difficult to find any explicit expression of attainment. It's there in a very subtle and implicit way here and there, but it's not explicit. Sadhu Om's verses, a lot of Sadhu Om's verses are prayers, praying for the grace of Bhagavan. Whereas Murugan's poetry is more difficult for people to understand because he wrote in a more classical style of Tamil. Though Sadhu Om also wrote in a classical style of Tamil, he managed to use very, very simple words and he managed to simplify it. So Sadhu Om's poetry is generally much easier for people to understand than Murugan's poetry. So they had different roles, but very complementary roles. Sadhu Om role was more Murugan has written a commentary on Bhagavan's Aksharammalai, but not on other works. Whereas Sadhu Om had a greater role to play explaining Bhagavan's teachings. So in many ways, Sadhu Om and Murugan have played very complementary roles. And the very first day that Sadhu Om came to Bhagavan, Bhagavan sent Sadhu Om, said Sadhu Om had written some songs before coming to Bhagavan, so he sang those songs in front of Bhagavan, and Bhagavan asked him, has Murugan seen this? Sadhu Om asked, who is Murugan? And Bhagavan said he lives there in Parakotta and told him where he lives. So Sadhu Om went and took his verses and showed to Murugan, and Murugan later related something that happened. That is, the previous day, there had been some talk in the old hall among the devotees, and some people were saying that nowadays, in old days, people were well educated in Tamil. Generally, in a few hundred years ago, all educated Tamilians would learn both classical Tamil and Sanskrit, so they were generally better educated. And there were many great poets in the past. But people were saying nowadays the standard of education has fallen so low that we can't expect to see the great poets like we saw in the past, except for Bhagavan and Murugan. We can't expect to see others like that. And Bhagavan then said, no, it is not so. Education isn't necessary to be, when the divine inspiration comes, even the people with relatively little education will shine as great poets. And he cited the example of Aranagiri Natha. And so this we were talking just the day before Sadhu Om came. And after Sadhu Om came and Bhagavan sent him to Murugan, when Murugan next came into the hall, Bhagavan said to him, see, just yesterday we were talking about the poets with divine inspiration, even though they may not have so much education. Today, an example of such a person has come to us, Bhagavan said. So Murugan was a great scholar in Tamil. He had studied Tamil very, very deeply. Whereas Sadhu Om had a normal school education, but Sadhu Om was a poet even before for example, Sadhu Om told me he was able to compose Bembas, which is a particular meter in Tamil, even before he knew the rules of Bemba, because he just had heard so many and recited so many, but he just recognized the pattern and he knew how to compose it without actually knowing the rules. So though Sadhu Om had relatively little education, he had studied up to matriculation in high school, so he had a basic education, but he wasn't a great scholar in Tamil. I mean, he hadn't studied Tamil to the same depth that Murugan had studied it. But he had that divine gift of poetry because of his bhakti and everything. So the very first day Sadhguru came to Bhagavan, he forged that friendship between Sadhguru and Murugana, and they remained close friends till the very end. And Sadhguru was later the right-hand man of Murugana for editing all his verses, preserving and editing all his verses. And Murugana said, no, but the only person who should be allowed to take care of all his unpublished verses and supervise their publication was Sadhguru, because he's the only person who really understood his poetry. So they had complementary roles to play. Does that adequately answer your question?
Yes.
Wait now. Not sure if that's a question or not. Praise will hurt us or will hurt us our ego. What about us praising others? This could harm others? Question mark.
Yes, we shouldn't. It's not good for us. It's not good for us either to praise or to be praised. Because when we're praising someone, okay, we can praise Bhagavan, because Bhagavan is not a person. Bhagavan is God and Guru. But praising ordinary people is we shouldn't. It's not good to put people on pedestals. It's not good for us to. We need to be attending to ourselves, not attending to others. It's a lot of people on the spiritual path. They like to put others on a pedestal, and think. But we can't know what the state of any other person. What we need to investigate is to find out what we are. Let's not be overly concerned about other people. Let's not have too high expectations of other people. One of the problems with putting people on a pedestal, if we praise someone and we think very highly of them, if they don't live up to our expectations, we'll be disappointed. So why have expectations of others? We're all human. We're all imperfect. None of us are perfect. Perfection lies only when in the annihilation of ego, and we don't know whose ego is annihilated and whose ego is not annihilated. So let us not indulge in praise or allow others to praise us. As far as possible, we should avoid praising and being praised. Except, of course, in the case of Bhagavan, we can praise Bhagavan to our heart's content. But the real way of praising Bhagavan is to follow what he taught us. Simply saying, oh, Bhagavan is great, is not the true praise. Putting into practice what he taught us, that is the true praise of Bhagavan, the true praise and the true adoration.
That covers it, Mary. Hello?
Yes, thank you very much.
Michael, you there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Well, we got here from Sanjay. Michael, I feel near yet so far to the goal. How to bridge this gap as soon as possible?
Sorry, what was that? How to close this gap? Or
how to bridge this gap as soon as possible?
By continuing to practice what Bhagavan taught us to practice. Persistent practice of self-investigation and self-surrender. We shouldn't worry whether a goal is near or far. Our duty is to follow what Bhagavan taught us. Doesn't matter whether the goal is near or far. Let the goal be 100 lifetimes away or the next minute. It doesn't matter. We know the direction we have to travel in. Let's travel in. Sooner or later we'll reach the goal. When we reach the goal doesn't matter. We need to be traveling on the path as fast as possible. And we can travel on it as fast as possible by persevering in practicing what Bhagavan taught us. Thinking about whether it's near or far is an unnecessary distraction. Because the idea of a goal, something near or far, is something other than ourselves. What we are seeking is what am I here and now, not what am I going to be in the future. So thinking about when am I going to attain this is unnecessary distraction. Who am I here and now? That is what we need to investigate and find out.
And we're meant to practice without consideration for results.
Exactly. The only result we need should be our own subsidence.
Thank you, sir.
When we truly subside, we won't be there to know it. So